I think about the pastors of my childhood that encouraged me to come forward for the children's sermons and laughed with me and treated me like I had something to offer right from the beginning. I think about the Sunday school teachers that I had growing up and how they always encouraged questions and a pursuit of faith. And then I also think about camp and how much Camp Moana in particular really encouraged my faith. I started camping there when I was in middle school, and it became this really solid place that I could come and really learn about God in a safe and loving environment. And it was my joy to be able to go back and serve as a camp counselor, and through that really began to discern this call to ministry, really began to feel inspired to bring other new people up in the faith, to encourage the young people, and teach the adults as well what it means to be truly loved by a God who forgives each and every one of our sins and continues to love us despite all of our flaws and our problems.
I was offered a position at my home congregation in Indiana to apply to become a ministry coordinator, and it was in that position that I feel like God stirred my spirit the most and began kind of telling me through people and situations that this was a field that I really needed to be in, wanted to be in. So seminary at that point was something that I felt like I at least needed to look into. I didn't know how I would come out on the other end, but I felt like if I didn't dive in and pursue it, that I would look back on my life and feel like I missed out, that I didn't take a chance at fulfilling my full God-given potential.
After several years in college, I actually left and became a hairdresser and had a wonderful career for 8 years. I owned my own barber shop and managed many salons. And I kept arguing with God. Everybody kept saying, you should be a pastor from the time I was little. And I thought, no, that's not my life. That's not going to be my life. And I kept arguing about this. But what I realized was through my career as a hairdresser, God was giving me the talents that I needed and the time to develop into what now is a wonderful calling in ministry. And I found over time that I was taking care of my clients. And I was doing pastoral care to my clients. I was there when their babies were born, and I was there when their husbands died. And it was truly when I realized that many of my conversations were turning to God with my clients that I said, okay, God, I need to stop arguing.
I had been a children's librarian, and I got laid off, and so I started working at a UCC congregation just to pay the bills. And the associate pastor had been a pastor in the ELCA that had left the ELCA because it was before the 2009 statement, and she had met her wife. And one day she said to me, when are you going to seminary already? I said, what? I can't go to seminary. I have tattoos, and, I'm a steelworker's daughter, and, and she said, well, do I look perfect to you? I said, no. And she said, well, God calls imperfect people. And it just kind of occurred to me that maybe my imperfections were something I could use to help others, and so thankful for having met her.
I've been thinking about it for a while, about going to seminary or possible some sort of entry into ministry, either as a pastor or in some other way, but I had this hang-up about the Bible because I still felt like I had a Sunday school level of knowledge about the Bible. I just didn't feel like I understood it enough, definitely not to be able to stand up in front of other people and preach week in and week out. And so my suggestion was, as a current pastor, as the church continued to break down the barriers that people have hang-ups on. Oftentimes people feel like they might be able to, but there's maybe one or two things that hold them back, seriously hold them back, that they would never consider it unless something changed. For me, it was about knowing and learning about the Bible, but it could be all sorts of different things. The other thing I think that really needs to be looked at is creating some sort of a system where time at seminary is cut down drastically, and get people into settings knowing full well that they don't have all the tools, no one ever does, to do ministry in that area. But then once they're at the church, to identify those things that they need and continue with continuing education classes that they would pick up along the way, maybe make some sort of, like other professions, lawyers or doctors or nurses, where they have to have so many continuing education credits per year, and then the individual pastors or leaders could pick those courses that would help them the most in that area. So
I think the financial burden seems to be great, especially for a second career person who may have a family, trying to raise a family. And for me, I was a single mother going through a divorce and needing to have, some financial support there. I didn't know I could apply for financial aid and that there were grants and scholarships available, even though I had a full-time job and worked full-time, but went to school and to seminary part-time. So I think that financial support, encouraging people to explore and know that there is going to be support all along the way, spiritually, financially, and educationally, is important.
One of the things that I do in my congregation is I try to help all people see their abilities for leadership, even especially with young kids. When I teach my first communion kids, they're in 3rd grade, and we go and we set the table for communion and we practice the Lord be with you and also with you. And I have each of them stand where I stand on Sunday morning and practice doing the leadership part of that and say what the pastor would say. Just hoping that these kids can stand there and think, maybe it's very far in the back of their minds, but they think, oh, maybe I could be a pastor. Like, this is where my pastor stands, and now I get to stand here. And just teaching them that, like, it's not a big scary thing to be up there, and help them to maybe see themselves in those roles and recognize things in themselves that they didn't know that they had.
We had such a phenomenal youth ministry where we had a youth board. So it was actual youth who led the ministry and got to be president and vice president and treasurer and have leadership in what our ministry looked like. And that was huge. And Pastor Kathy helped us to lead youth-led worship services. So got to get up in front of the congregation and lead the prayers. We wrote skits for the sermon. And this was an opportunity for me to really delve into my faith more personally. And, PK would give us questions and to really get us to dive into our faith and think about it, and not just surface level sort of understanding of who Jesus is and what faith meant to us. So I had a congregation where I was allowed to explore my faith very deeply and get up and present it to the whole community, and sometimes present it well and sometimes not so well, but my congregation still loved me no matter how those services went, and that was hugely important in having faith formation and getting to see that this was going to be a part of my identity.